Good morning, everyone, and Chodesh Tov. Today we begin the month of Elul, the month of introspection. Tell a story about a guy walking through an airport and he sees a Zen master selling hot dogs, $1. So he orders a hot dog. When he hands him the hot dog, he hands him a $5 bill. The Zen master puts the $5 bill in his pocket. The guy looks at him and he says, "What about my change?" And the Zen master says, "Change, my friend, must come from within." Well, this is the month that we look within and we find the will and the vision to change our lives for the better. The opening verse of this week's Torah portion says, "Shoftim v'shotrim," judges and officers, you should appoint for yourself in all of your gates, in all of your cities. And the question is, if it says you should appoint it in all of your gates, why the extra word, judges and officers you should appoint for yourself in all of your gates? Why for yourself? And our rabbis say there's a deeper message. Every human being is a city unto themselves, a world unto themselves. And just like a city has gates, we have eyes, we have ears, we have a mouth. And therefore the Torah says you need to appoint judges, discernment to decide what are you going to listen to, what perspectives are you going to absorb, what is your eyes going to see, what are you going to focus on, and what words will you speak. And you need not just judgment, but you also need the discipline, the officers, to enforce that everything you see, hear, and say, your gates are protected, guarded, and secure. You see, a lot of the things we see and hear in this world are things that the companies, the social media companies, the advertising companies want us to absorb for their benefit, not for our benefit. What we have to make sure is that everything that comes into our gateways, into our body, into our mind, into our soul, into our hearts, is healthy and productive, which is going to help us achieve our fullest potential. You know, every year we come to the month of Elul, and tomorrow morning we start blowing the shofar every day and prepare for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the high holidays. And it seems like we're just repeating everything all over again. But it's really like a spiral staircase. You go higher and higher. You come to the same place in the circular spiral staircase, but you're a level higher. Every year we have to improve, and we have to ask ourselves, how have we utilized the past year to its fullest? How have we fallen short? And how are we going to utilize the gift and the potential of a new year to the best of our abilities? Tell a story about a professor who once walked into a classroom with an empty jar. And he says, this jar represents life. And then he filled it with rocks. He says, you see, it looks like the jar is full, but there's still more room. Took out a bag of sand and poured it into the jar, and it went between the rocks. And now the sand filled up the jar to its lid. And then he said, it looks like it's full, but there's still more room. He took out pebbles, and the pebbles fell between the rocks, and then of course the sand filled it up to the top. And he said, well, now that I have the rocks and the pebbles and the sand, it looks like it's full, but there's still room. And he took out a bottle of beer and he poured it into the jar, and the liquid went between the grains of sand, the rocks and the pebbles. And he said, this is what life's all about. The rocks are the big building blocks of life that we all need to focus on. Our family, our education, our community. But then there's the small things in life, which are our hobbies, our passions, our interests. And then there's the minute stuff that are really insignificant. Those are the sand. He said if you start with the rocks, there's always room for the pebbles and then for the sand. But if you start with the small stuff, the insignificant stuff, the trivial things that are a waste of time, you will not be focused on what's really important in life. And they said, what about the can of beer? What's that all about? He said, no matter what, always have time to say Al Chaim. The next month, and then the high holidays, and then Sukkot, is a time to ask ourselves, are we focused on what's our priorities in life? Our relationship with God, our fulfillment of our potential, our connection to our spouse, to our children, to our grandchildren, to growing and learning as a human being. Those are the building blocks. Then there's the rocks, our interests, our hobbies. And then, of course, there's the trivial stuff like the sand. And then, no matter what, always say L'chaim, celebrate the gift of life. And throughout the holidays, that's the one word we're going to say more than any other word. L'chaim, to life. God should give us good life, to be a joyous, happy, productive, meaningful, satisfying, and fulfilling life. So I wish everyone a wonderful journey over the next 40 days, starting today, until we get to Yom Kippur, which is going to be the climax and the highlight of this period. And hopefully, when we get to the top of the mountain on Yom Kippur, we can look back when the shofar is blown at the end of the fast and say that starting with tomorrow morning, from the first blast of the shofar every day, we've grown, improved, bettered our lives, and prioritized what's really important. And most of all, celebrated with joy and l'chaim. Have a wonderful day.